King Robert Baratheon was dead, and the Red Keep was already buzzing with whispers. The air in King's Landing had changed, no longer filled with the stench of wine and sweat, but something colder. It was tension, the kind that made even the guards hold their breath. Ned Stark stood at the window of his chambers, looking down at the courtyard. He had made up his mind. For too long, he had played the honorable fool in a city of vipers. But not today. Not anymore. Today, he would do what was right, even if it meant blood. He turned from the window as footsteps echoed behind him. It was Sir Barristan Selmy. "Lord Stark," the old knight said, "the council is gathered. They await your presence in the throne room." Ned nodded. "Then let's not make them wait." As they walked through the hallways of the Red Keep, Ned's mind raced. He had already sent a raven to Stannis Baratheon, informing him of the truth, that Joffrey was no rightful heir, that the boy was born of incest, the bastard son of Queen Cersei and her brother Jaime. It was a truth that would break the realm, or save it. The doors to the throne room opened. The high hall was packed with lords, bannermen, guards, and whispered fear. On the Iron Throne sat Joffrey Baratheon, his chin high, his face smug. To his left stood Cersei, cold and proud. On the other side, the Hound loomed like a shadow. Littlefinger stood near the dais, eyes sharp like a hawk, watching everything. Varys stood silently in a corner, unreadable. Ned stepped forward, unflinching. Cersei smiled tightly. "Lord Stark," she said, voice dripping with sugar and venom. "You arrive at last. The king has summoned you." Ned bowed slightly, not to Joffrey but to the throne itself. Then he stood tall. "I come not to kneel," he said, his voice loud and clear, "but to speak the truth." The room fell silent. Even Joffrey leaned forward. "The man you call king," Ned said, pointing at Joffrey, "is not the son of Robert Baratheon. He is a product of treason and lies." Gasps echoed. Cersei's face went white. "How dare you?" "Dare?" Ned snapped. "I have proof, the late king's own words, and the blood of his true heir, Stannis Baratheon." The lords began murmuring. Mace Tyrell looked confused. Renly Baratheon, standing by the side wall, clenched his fists. Even Sir Barristan blinked in disbelief. Littlefinger raised a brow. "And who, Lord Stark, will enforce this truth? You stand alone." That was the question. Ned's gamble had been sending word to the City Watch, hoping their loyalty could be bought or at least swayed. He had also written to loyal bannermen, but they were days away. He turned to Janos Slynt, commander of the City Watch. "I ask you to uphold the law, protect the realm from a false king." Janos hesitated. Sweat dripped down his brow, and then he stepped forward. "The City Watch stands with Lord Stark." Chaos broke out. Cersei screamed for her guards. The Hound drew his sword. But before blood could spill, Sir Barristan stepped forward. "I will not fight for a false king," he said, his voice cutting the air like steel. Joffrey stood from the throne, red-faced. "I am your king. Arrest him." But half the guards didn't move. Some dropped their spears. The people were divided. Ned stepped closer. "By the laws of gods and men, you are not king, Joffrey, and I will not let this realm burn for your mother's lies." And in that moment, King's Landing stood on a blade's edge. One wrong word, and the streets would run with blood. Steel clashed outside the Red Keep. By nightfall, the City Watch had sealed the castle gates. Gold cloaks were stationed at every wall, every corridor, every hall. Word had spread like wildfire through King's Landing. Ned Stark had challenged the crown. People whispered of treason, of war, of truth, but most of all, of fear. Inside the council chamber, chaos ruled. Cersei had been removed from the throne room under heavy guard, still screaming about her son's right. Joffrey was in the Queen's tower, pacing like a cornered dog, foaming at the mouth. His screams could be heard down the hallway, but Ned was not celebrating. He sat alone in Robert's old solar, a goblet of wine untouched beside him. The door creaked open. Sir Barristan entered, followed by Varys. "Lord Stark," said the eunuch softly, "you've moved too quickly. This city is a viper's nest. You must understand what you've stirred." Ned looked up slowly. "I only spoke the truth." Barristan sighed. "And in doing so, you've unchained chaos. The throne room is split. Some support you, others fear you. The Tyrells are watching. Renly has disappeared. And Stannis, well, he has yet to respond." Ned clenched his jaw. He knew he was racing against time. If Stannis didn't act soon, the fragile balance he'd created would collapse. He had named Stannis in front of the realm as the rightful heir, but naming was one thing, taking the throne was another. "Where is Sansa?" Ned asked, his voice suddenly soft. Varys bowed slightly. "Still in the castle, unharmed. But the Queen's loyalists will try to use her, and Arya has vanished. I fear she's gone into the city." Ned stood quickly, his heart pounding. "Find Arya, now. If any harm comes to her—" "She's quick and clever," said Varys, interrupting gently. "She has the wolf's blood. She'll survive." Just then, footsteps came rushing. It was Janos Slynt, his face pale. "They've taken the Tower of the Hand," he said breathlessly. "Some Lannister men who slipped through. They were hiding among our own." Ned grabbed his sword. "How many?" 10, maybe more. They were looking for documents, letters, anything. And suddenly Ned knew. They were searching for the raven he had sent to Stannis. They were trying to erase the proof. He turned to Varys. "Have the ravens been intercepted?" Varys gave no answer. Ned's eyes narrowed. "You knew." Varys did not flinch. "I serve the realm, Lord Stark, not a single man." That night, the Red Keep became a tomb. Every hallway was patrolled by men, unsure of who their allies were. Some gold cloaks swore loyalty to Ned, others secretly obeyed the Lannisters. And every shadow could hide a blade. Joffrey, locked in his chamber, began screaming threats. "I am the king! I'll have Ned Stark's head! I'll cut it off myself!" But no one came. Across the sea, rumors were already spreading. Of a coup, of a northern lord who defied the queen, of a child king without a crown, of a war that was only beginning. The next morning, Ned stood on the balcony overlooking the city. Smoke rose from the slums. The people were growing restless. Hunger, fear, and confusion walked the streets hand in hand. The Game of Thrones had changed forever. Catelyn Stark's raven had not yet returned. Robb had not yet answered. And still no word from Stannis. Then Sir Barristan entered with news. "Renly, Baratheon has fled the city. With Sir Loras Tyrell and over 50 armed men, they rode out in the night. Ned's blood ran cold. He's going to Highgarden," Barristan added grimly. "To rally support. He means to claim the throne before Stannis can respond." Ned closed his eyes. So this was it. He had tried to speak truth, but in doing so, he had triggered a war of kings. The Iron Throne now had 3 claimants: Joffrey, the illegitimate boy; Renly, the charming usurper; and Stannis, the cold and lawful. Brother, and what of Robb? And Daenerys across the sea? Ned Stark had lit the fire, and it was spreading. The wind howled through the streets of King's Landing like a whisper of doom. Over the next few days, the capital slipped further into uncertainty. No clear ruler sat the Iron Throne. Joffrey remained imprisoned in the Queen's Tower, raving. Like a mad child, Cersei had been placed under heavy watch, but she still wielded influence through whispers and gold. Ned Stark, though victorious in the first stroke, now stood in the middle of a battlefield with no map and too many enemies. Every morning brought new tension. One day, a dozen gold cloaks deserted their posts. Another, a Lannister knight, was found murdered in Flea Bottom, skinned and strung from a butcher's hook. The people were restless, Riots broke out over food. The Crown's coffers were nearly empty. King's Landing was a snake pit, and Ned stood in the centre, trying to keep order with honour alone. Then came the Raven. It arrived just after sunrise. The black bird perched on the window of Ned's study, its scroll sealed with a fiery heart, Stannis Baratheon's sigil. Ned opened it with trembling hands. It was brief, cold, formal. "I will come for what is mine. Hold the city. Do not fail me again." That was all. No reassurance, no thanks, just expectation. Ned felt his stomach turn. He had staked everything on Stannis, a man respected but unloved, strict but isolated. Now he had to hold a city that hated him, for a king that inspired no loyalty. Later that day, Ned met with his dwindling supporters in the council chamber. Barristan Selmy, still loyal. Varys, neutral as ever. Janos Slynt, slippery and fearful. Maester Pycelle, barely able to hide his longing for Cersei's return. And Peter Baelish. "Smiling, always smiling. We are losing the city," Ned said, voice low but firm. "Renly has gone south. Joffrey's supporters are regrouping. We must prepare for Stannis' arrival, and the war that comes with it." Littlefinger leaned forward. "And what if Stannis never makes it through the gates?" "What are you suggesting?" Barristan asked sharply. Baelish shrugged. "A sword in the right hand can stop an army in the wrong one. Why wait for Stannis at all? Why not take the throne ourselves? Rule in the name of one of your sons, perhaps, or back Renly, who has charm and the reach." Ned's face turned hard. "I will not place a false king on the throne. Not again. Not after Robert. The law is clear. And yet the law never stopped men from killing each other," Littlefinger murmured. Varys gave a polite cough. "If I may, my lords, the city is already breaking. Stannis is weeks away at best. Renly is riding hard, and the Tyrells will support him with gold, men, and food. We must think with care. Too much honor can be dangerous." Ned stood. "I did not come to King's Landing to play games. I came to serve the realm." Littlefinger laughed softly. "And yet here you are, Lord Stark, knee-deep in the game. Whether you play or not, the board is set, the pieces are moving." That night, Arya was found. She'd been hiding in the dungeons beneath the Great Sept, dirty, bruised, but alive. Ned embraced her with more emotion than he'd shown in years. The reunion was brief, but it steeled something inside him. He would not let his daughters be caught in this madness. He needed to send them home, soon, but there was no time. 3 days later, the news arrived. Renly Baratheon had crowned himself king. He declared Joffrey a bastard, Stannis a cold-hearted fanatic, and Ned Stark a deluded northern traitor. Highgarden stood with Renly. So did Storm's End, and now an army was marching. Ned paced the floor of the Tower of the Hand. His hands shook with rage. How quickly the truth had become twisted. He had tried to do what was right, and now the realm called him a usurper. That evening he summoned Ser Barristan and Janos. "I want every gate watched. If Renly approaches the city, we hold the walls. We do not open the gates to him or any who serve him." Janos hesitated. "What if the people turn? They liked Renly. They loved Robert. They fear." "Then let them fear," Ned said. "Better fear than lies." But he knew deep down it wouldn't hold. Not with starving mouths and growing unrest. The real war was no longer about one throne. It was now about survival. Truth versus power. Honor versus ambition. And Ned Stark, for all his strength and courage, stood alone in a city that never loved him. And the worst was yet to come. The sky over King's Landing turned grey, as if the gods themselves were mourning what was coming. Storms gathered on the horizon, both in the sky and in the hearts of men. Every alley carried a whisper. Every tavern hummed with rumour. Every noble house, large or small, began picking sides. War wasn't just coming, it had already arrived, quietly, like poison in a cup. Ned Stark stood in the map room, eyes fixed on a carved image of the Seven Kingdoms. His fingers traced the jagged coastline where Renly's banners were last. Seen. Reports confirmed it now. 40,000 men marched under the golden rose of Highgarden and the stag of Storm's End. Renly's army had passed Bitterbridge and was moving fast. Too fast. Maester Luwin's Raven confirmed another blow. The Lannister forces in the west were gathering under Tywin, and Jaime was rumoured to be riding out again. The Riverlands had begun to burn, and Catelyn's family, the Tullys, were already caught in the storm, and still not a word from Stannis, not a ship, not a soldier, not a second Raven. He waits, Ned muttered to himself. He waits for me to bleed before he moves. Ser Barristan entered the room with grim news. There was a riot near the Sept of Baelor, he said. 3 dead. They were shouting Renly's name. Some threw stones at the gold cloaks. Ned clenched his fists. And what did the watch do? Half fought the crowd. The other half joined them. He shouldn't have been surprised. The people remembered Robert's face in Renly. They didn't care about law, about legitimacy. They wanted smiles and feasts, not cold truths and letters signed by dead kings. That night, Ned visited the Queen's Tower. Cersei stood behind the bars, still regal despite her disgrace. Her face was pale, but her eyes were aflame. When she saw him, she smiled, as if she were the one with power. "Come to gloat, Lord Stark," she said softly, "or have you finally realized the cost of your precious honor?" Ned ignored the jab. "You still have friends in the city. Lannister gold buys more than swords. It buys—" "Silence, fear, betrayal." Cersei laughed bitterly. "Of course it does. Unlike you, I was raised to understand what power truly means. Men fight wars, Ned, but it's always women like me who win them." Ned stepped closer to the bars. "You brought war upon your own, son?" "No," she said, her smile fading. "You did. You chose the law over peace. You chose truth over mercy. You chose Stannis. And now this city will burn." For the first time, Ned felt a flicker of doubt. Was he the villain in their eyes now? Back in the Tower of the Hand, Sansa sat by the window, her face pale and drawn. She had stopped crying weeks ago, but the fear had carved deep into her. She hardly spoke. Arya, in contrast, was more fire than flesh. She had taken to carrying a dagger and following guards around, pretending to be one herself. "I don't want to go home anymore," she told Ned one evening. "I want to fight." He looked at her, saw Lyanna's ghost in her stubborn face and said, "You will fight, just not here." He knew he had to get them out, now. Before the storm came crashing down, then came the final blow. At dawn, a raven arrived with a black seal. It bore Stannis's mark, but the message was brief, cold, final. "Too late," Renly has declared. "The realm must see him punished before they see me crowned. Hold the capital or lose it. The Lord of Light guides me now." The Lord of Light. Ned felt the blood drain from his face. What was Stannis doing? Had he fallen under some foreign priestess's spell? Was this the man he had chosen? Barristan entered moments later. "Renly has reached the King's Road. He'll be at the gates within 3 days." "Does he send terms?" Ned asked. "Yes. He demands your surrender and the release of Joffrey and Cersei into his custody. He offers your daughters safe passage north if you kneel." Ned's heart twisted. Kneel to Renly, a false king, charming and dangerous, or fight and risk everything. He walked to the balcony and looked out at the city. The bells were silent now, but they would ring soon. For war, for fire, for death. And Ned Stark, for all his honor, would have to choose what kind of man he truly was before the gates fell. The first horn blew before sunrise, deep and long like a dying beast echoing over stone. It came from the southern wall, the one facing the King's Road. The sound spread like a plague across the city. People bolted from sleep, windows opened. And silence fell before the storm. Renly Baratheon had arrived. Ned Stark stood atop the battlements of the Red Keep, wrapped in his cloak, his grey eyes locked on the horizon. Below, stretching out like an ocean of steel and banners, stood Renly's army, 40,000 men, bright gold, green and blue banners flapping in the wind. The stag and the rose intertwined, and at their head, mounted on a black charger, sat Renly himself, smiling, waving to the people as if he were already king. Behind Ned, Sir Barristan shifted nervously. "They cheer for him, my lord, not for us." Ned didn't answer. He had expected this. The small folk didn't care for bloodlines or legitimacy. They wanted the memory of Robert, and Renly looked the part. Young, handsome, full of false hope, Janos Slynt shuffled up beside them, his face slick with sweat. "The watch is restless. Some want to open the gates. Some say we should turn you over to Renly to spare the city." Ned turned slowly. "And you?" "I follow whoever keeps my head on my shoulders. That wasn't loyalty. That was cowardice." Back inside the Red Keep, the small council chamber was colder than ever. Varys was the only one who looked calm, folding his hands as if this were a routine meeting. "And not the eve of siege. Renly offers generous terms," Varys said smoothly. "He promises safe passage for your daughters, a northern retreat for you, peace for the capital." "And a crown for himself," Ned muttered. Littlefinger chuckled. "Of course, crowns don't come free." Ned's knuckles whitened. "He has no right." Barristan leaned in. "Perhaps not, but he has an army, and we have a starving city." Ned closed his eyes. Every option led to ruin. Stannis had abandoned him for shadows and flames. The Lannisters plotted in silence. Robb Stark remained in the north, uncommitted. If he fought, he would lose the city. If he surrendered, he would lose his honor. And if he waited, someone else would make the choice for him. That night, he walked the halls of the Red Keep alone. The walls whispered to him of broken kings, fallen lords, dead children. This city had a way of eating the good and feeding the wicked. He stopped at the Queen's Tower. The guards let him pass without question. Inside, Cersei sat by a fire, her chains light but firm. Her hair had begun to grow wild, her lips dry, but her eyes still burned with that same twisted pride. She looked up, amused. "Come to beg for advice from the Queen you betrayed." "I came to understand," Ned said softly, "how you played this game for so long." She tilted her head. "Because I never cared for honor. That's why I survived. I lied, I seduced, I killed, and I wore my sins like silk. You, Lord Stark, wear yours like chains." Ned stared at her in silence. Then she leaned forward. "He will kill you, Renly, or Stannis, or whoever wins. You're the last man in Westeros who still believes in truth." Ned turned and left without a word, but her voice followed him like a curse. The next morning, the sun rose blood-red. Renly sent a messenger through the gates, a knight in fine armor bearing a white flag. His words were clear. "Renly Baratheon, first of his name, demands the surrender of Eddard Stark, the release of Cersei and Joffrey, and the crown of the Seven Kingdoms. Failure to comply by nightfall will be seen as defiance. The city will be taken." When the knight left, silence gripped the hall. Ned sat alone in the war room, staring at the fire. He thought of Winterfell, of Robb, of Catelyn, of Jon, of Benjen, of the dead. He thought of honor, and then he stood. "Prepare a raven to Robb. Tell him to ready the north. Tell him war is here." Barristan bowed. "And the answer to Renly?" Ned's voice was steady. "We do not kneel to false kings." Outside, the drums began, and the walls of King's Landing trembled. The drums never stopped. By dusk, they were all you could hear, slow, heavy, unforgiving, as if time itself was marching toward something that couldn't be undone. Renly's army had surrounded King's Landing on 3 sides. The northern gate remained untouched, for now, but that wouldn't last. And inside the walls, the city was breaking apart at the seams. People rioted in the streets, crying out, for food, for mercy, for Renly. The gold cloaks were stretched thin, some deserted, some turned their blades on each other. And high above them all, in the Tower of the Hand, Ned Stark stood like a man waiting for the gallows. He hadn't slept, he hadn't eaten. All that remained in him now was resolve. At dawn, the horns sounded, not a call for war, but surrender. Janos, Slint burst into the chamber, panicked. "They've opened the gate! The south gate! Some of the watch! Traitors! They opened it!" Ned's heart stopped. Renly's men were inside the city. He grabbed his sword. Ice, the great blade that once stood for justice, for peace. It felt heavier now. He looked at Sir Barristan. "We hold the Red Keep, as long as we can." Varys, calm as ever, stepped forward. "No, you won't." "What do you mean?" "I mean," the eunuch said, "that the game is over. You played it too straight, Lord Stark. You thought the realm could be saved by truth alone, but you forget. Truth has no sword." There was a knock at the door, not frantic, not loud, just final. Littlefinger entered, flanked by 2 Tyrell knights in golden armor. He was smiling, of course, always smiling. "Ned," he said softly, "I warned you. You should have played the game." "You told me to trust you," Ned said. "I told you to be smart." The Tyrells stepped forward, spears lowered. Barristan reached for his sword, but Ned raised a hand. "Don't!" Littlefinger nodded, almost sympathetically. "It's over. Renly's in the throne room. He sits the Iron Throne now. The people love him. The lords bend the knee. Your time has passed." "I won't kneel," Ned said. "I know." The walk through the Red Keep was quiet. No shouting, no chaos, just silence, the kind that follows a death. When they entered the throne room, Renly was already seated. He looked like a king, polished, radiant, wearing Robert's old crown like it belonged to him. At his side stood Ser Loras, smiling. The High Septon blessed them from the steps below. Lords filled the room. Some Ned recognized, others he didn't. Ned was brought before the throne like a prisoner, but he walked tall. He saw Sansa and Arya in the crowd, held back by guards. Sansa was weeping. Arya looked ready to bite through iron. Renly stood. "Lord Eddard Stark," he said, his voice echoing. "You are charged with treason, with attempting to seat a false king, with dividing the realm." Ned didn't flinch. "The realm was already broken. I only tried to bind it with truth." Renly stepped closer. "You were wrong, Ned. People don't follow truth. They follow power. You chose a man with no friends, no army, and no smile." "He was the rightful king," Ned said. Renly looked at him for a long moment. "And I am the one who won." There it was. The truth at last, not written in scrolls but carved in war. A silence fell. Then Renly spoke again, this time louder. "Bend the knee, and I will spare your daughters. I will send you north. You can live out your days in peace." Ned looked at his girls, Sansa, broken, Arya, burning. He looked back at Renly. "No." The word was simple, final, like a sword driven into stone. Renly's face didn't change. He nodded once and gave the signal. The room filled with gasps as Sir Ilyn Payne stepped forward, ice in his hands. Arya screamed. Sansa fainted. Ned was pushed. To his knees, he didn't resist. As the great sword rose, he whispered not to the gods, not to Renly, but to the north. "Tell Robb, winter is coming." And then ice fell. Thus ended the last stand of Ned Stark, not by Lannister steel, but by a new king's mercy denied. A man who dared to speak truth in a world that fed on lies. His death didn't stop the war, it ignited it. For in the north, a wolf had begun to howl, and this time it wouldn't kneel either.